The camera flashes were still blinding me when my husband leaned in and dropped a bomb that was meant to shatter my entire life. For 18 years, I had raised his daughter as my own, loving her, sacrificing my youth, and giving her every piece of my heart. But right there, in front of a room packed with high-ranking military officials, distinguished guests, and family, Richard looked at me with cold, arrogant eyes and whispered, "Thank you for raising my mistress's daughter. Your services are no longer required." He thought he had delivered the ultimate humiliation. He thought I would crumble right then and there. But what he didn't realize was that the girl wearing that graduation cap wasn't just his daughter anymore. When she took the microphone to deliver her valedictorian address, she looked straight at Richard and said 4 words that froze the blood in his veins. "My name is Natalie Foster, and at 48 years old, I thought I knew everything about the man I'd spent 22 years loving." When Richard brought home an infant girl 18 years ago, claiming her mother had abandoned her, I didn't hesitate. I couldn't have biological children, so I poured my soul into raising little Maya, treating her like my own flesh and blood. As Richard rose through the ranks as a high-ranking military officer, I managed our home, sustained his reputation, and put my own life on hold. Now, we were sitting in the front row at Maya's elite military academy graduation. Camera flashes bounced off the polished brass buttons of Richard's uniform, illuminating his proud, polished smile. But as the crowd cheered, Richard leaned toward me, his breath cold against my ear. He didn't hand me a celebratory program. Instead, he slid a folded set of divorce papers into my lap, hidden beneath the commencement schedule. "Thank you for raising my mistress's daughter, Natalie," he whispered, his eyes filled with a cruel, arrogant triumph. "Your services are no longer required. Hand over your house keys after the ceremony and leave quietly." He believed he had crushed me, expecting me to flee the auditorium in tears while he took all the glory. But as Maya walked up to the podium to deliver her valedictorian address, Richard had no idea that the bomb he had just dropped was about to detonate right back in his face. To understand how I ended up sitting in that auditorium, holding divorce papers while my husband smirked beside me, you have to go back 18 years. I remember the stormy night Richard walked through our front door carrying a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. He claimed a woman from his past had abandoned the baby on his doorstep, leaving him as the sole guardian. Having recently learned that I would never be able to conceive, I saw that little girl as an absolute miracle. I named her Maya, and from that very first night, I swore to protect her with everything I had. For nearly 2 decades, I built my entire life around Maya and Richard's demanding military career. Every time Richard was transferred to a new base, I packed up our lives, gave up my own professional ambitions, and ensured our home ran seamlessly. I coordinated move after move, organized official dinners, and raised Maya through feverish nights and school milestones completely on my own during his long deployments. To the outside world, Richard was a dedicated officer and a loving family man. But behind closed doors, his warmth was non-existent. Over the years, subtle belittlement turned into blatant disrespect. He treated me less like his equal partner and more like an unpaid housekeeper and nanny who was simply convenient to keep around. Whenever I tried to express my feelings, he dismissed me, reminding me that he was the breadwinner providing our high-status lifestyle. What I never realized was that while I was pouring my soul into making our family whole, Richard was calculating every step to discard me the moment Maya stepped into adulthood. As the dean announced the valedictorian, thunderous applause echoed across the grand hall. Maya walked up to the stage with crisp, confident steps, her white uniform immaculate under the bright auditorium lights. Beside me, Richard adjusted his metal-laden chest, leaning back in his chair with an insufferable smirk. He cast a sideways glance at me, taking immense pride in my silence, convinced that his cruel revelation had broken my spirit completely. To him, this moment was his ultimate victory. He was stepping into a glorious future while I was left shattered in the dust. Maya adjusted the microphone, looking out over the sea of high-ranking military officers, distinguished faculty, and proud families. A heavy silence fell across the hall as her voice echoed through the speakers. She began not with a typical canned speech about future ambitions, but by addressing her upbringing directly. She spoke about the discipline, sacrifice, and values that had shaped her into the top cadet of her graduating class. Then, her sharp gaze drifted down to the front row, locking onto Richard and me. "Everything I have achieved today," Maya began, her voice steady and ringing clear, "is built upon the foundation laid by the two people sitting directly in front of me. For years, the public narrative of my life has been carefully curated. My father, Colonel Richard Foster, has always taken great pride in presenting my accomplishments as a reflection of his own stern leadership and military discipline. He loved telling his colleagues how his firm hand guided me to the top of this academy." She paused, allowing her words to hang heavily in the air. Richard's smile broadened slightly as he acknowledged a fellow officer nearby, thoroughly enjoying what he assumed was a public tribute to his greatness, but he had no idea what was coming next. Maya's voice did not tremble as she looked directly at Richard. "What my father failed to mention in all those press releases and officer dinners," she continued, her words cutting through the silence, "is that he was barely present for my life. The man sitting before you with a chest full of medals isn't the reason I stand here as valedictorian. He was simply the absent ghost who returned only when there was a camera to smile for." Gasps rippled softly through the rows behind us, but Maya didn't break her stride. "The person who actually raised me, who taught me honor, who stayed awake with me through brutal, feverish nights and endless study sessions during long deployments, is my mother, Natalie. When my father was off building a second life, my mother stepped up without hesitation. She even paid my tuition and academic expenses using her personal inheritance, funds my father tried to siphon away for his own hidden ventures." Richard's face drained of color as he half rose from his seat, his hands gripping his armrests. But before he could interrupt, Maya delivered the final blow. "My biological roots may lie elsewhere, but my loyalty lies with integrity," Maya announced loudly into the microphone. "That is why, as of 9 o'clock this morning, I have officially changed my surname to Foster, stripping away my father's name entirely. Furthermore, earlier today, a comprehensive file detailing financial misconduct, unauthorized use of military allowances, and secret offshore accounts was submitted directly to the Armed Forces Board of Review. Father, your secrets are no longer secret." The entire auditorium dropped into a suffocating absolute silence. High-ranking generals, decorated officers, and proud families sat paralyzed, staring back and forth between the stage and the front row. Richard's face transformed from pale gray to a mottled, furious red. He opened his mouth to speak, to yell, to somehow regain control of the room, but no sound came out. The polished military leader who had commanded respect for decades was suddenly exposed, stripped of his dignity in front of the very peers he had spent his entire life trying to impress. Up on the stage, Maya didn't flinch under the weight of the shocked crowd. She stood tall, adjusting her white dress uniform, her posture perfectly reflecting the quiet strength she had learned over a lifetime. "To my father," Maya concluded, her voice echoing clearly off the high-vaulted ceilings, "you tried to teach me that power comes from control and deceit. But to my mother, Natalie, thank you for showing me that true strength comes from honor, sacrifice, and unconditional love. You didn't just raise a daughter, you raised a woman who knows how to fight for what is right." With those final words, Maya stepped away from the podium. She deliberately bypassed the academy director, ignored Richard entirely as he sat frozen in his chair, and walked straight down the center aisle. Standing before me, she reached out, taking my shaking hands in hers and pulled me into a fierce, protective embrace right in front of the silent room. The fallout from Maya's speech was swift, ruthless, and absolute. Within 48 hours of the ceremony, the Armed Forces Board of Review launched an official investigation into Richard's financial records. The detailed files Maya had handed over, containing bank transfers, forged signatures, and undisclosed offshore accounts, left the military board with no choice. Rather than facing a drawn-out, highly publicized court-martial that would ruin the Academy's standing, Richard was stripped of his command and given a dishonorable administrative discharge, effectively destroying his 30-year career in a single blow. With Richard's reputation in ruins, our legal battle over the divorce turned completely in my favor. Because the financial misconduct files proved that Richard had been systematically hiding joint marital assets to prepare for discarding me, my legal team seized full control of the narrative. The court awarded me our primary estate, frozen joint funds, and a substantial financial settlement to compensate for the decades of hidden assets. Richard's grand plan to leave me with nothing backfired entirely, leaving him financially crippled and legally cornered. Desperate to salvage whatever was left of his life, Richard tried endlessly to reach out. My phone buzzed constantly with voicemail after voicemail, first filled with furious threats, then devolving into pathetic pleas for forgiveness. He begged Maya to retract her statements and asked me to intervene with the board, claiming he had made a terrible mistake. But neither of us answered. We blocked his number, changed the locks on the estate, and severed every remaining tie, leaving Richard to face the isolated, disgraced reality he had created for himself. 6 months after that unforgettable graduation day, Maya and I officially opened the doors to the Foster Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal aid and educational grants to military spouses and young women facing financial abuse. Using the financial settlement and our reclaimed peace, we turned a story of betrayal into a lifeline for others who thought they had no way out. Looking back at that auditorium, I realize Richard thought he was delivering a fatal blow when he handed me those divorce papers. He believed my devotion made me weak and easily disposable. What he failed to understand was that during those 18 years of sacrifice, I wasn't just enduring his neglect. I was raising a fearless, principled woman who watched, learned, and knew exactly when to stand up for justice. Richard tried to humiliate me, but in doing so, he only exposed who really held the strength and integrity in our family. Today, Maya and I are stepping into a future defined by honor, freedom, and mutual respect, leaving the shadow of his greed far behind us. Now, I want to ask all of you watching, what would you have done if you were standing in Maya's shoes at that podium? Would you have spoken up the way she did? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and let me know which city or country you're watching from so I can see how far our story has reached. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen to watch another incredible story.